Hi, this is Scott Garibay. Today we're going to talk about Andrew Yang, and we're going to talk about a proposal plan that I am putting forward for Andrew Yang and his team to use on September 12th, to use in the September 12th ABC Houston debate. All right, and so we are on countdown now. This is day 3, Monday day 3, Tuesday day 2, Wednesday day 1. Thursday, day 0. That will be September 12th for the September 12th for the ABC Houston debate. Debate number 3. Andrew Yang will be there. Tulsi Gabbard will not. Gillibrand will not. Marianne Williamson will not, and a whole bunch of other scrubs that I can't even remember their name anymore. Right? All right. So this is huge. This is really big. All right. All right. So I really think, UBI is amazing. I'm just so proud of Andrew Yang, how hard he's working, the momentum he's building. But UBI is proving to not be enough. UBI is a world-changing idea, but the media is a beast, and you have to feed the beast. You have to feed it new ideas, big ideas, routinely, right? And the reality is, while we would like for UBI to be all that UBI and a robot vengeance platform to be enough for Andrew Yang to win the presidency, it's not going to be. You need to have good ideas on a routine rhythm. And so I'm going to leave this idea right here for Andrew Yang and for his team. Now, this is really, I'm going to say this right now, this is an outlandish idea, but if you are paying attention, we live in an outlandish world. And I think that's one of the reasons why Donald Trump is having so much victory right now, is he has outlandish ideas for an outlandish world. And that's where we've arrived. And I really think Andrew Yang needs to start to move on to that platform of understanding that the media is a beast that must be fed, and feeding that beast on a routine rhythm, right? This idea is very, very big. I think it's absolutely it's going to make the September 12th ABC Houston debate an absolute catapult for Andrew Yang. This could hurl him past his opponents and really past Trump. It's huge. It uses Trump's own momentum against him, and I think it's really big. I really appreciate everybody that listens to this channel. There's a little bit of a setup here. I'm going to try to move through it quickly so that we can get this whole idea out. And also, I just want to say, if this seems unusual, like I'm putting this here for September 12th, how will he have time? How will Andrew Yang have time to implement it? Well, that's one of the things. You've got to use the facts on the ground at the time and build in real time. This is something that every tech company in the world does this now, and politicians are going to need to start doing this now too. I think this is a really valuable plan for Andrew Yang to use right now, because if I'm setting this here for Andrew and his team, they can listen to it today, plan on it tomorrow, put it into get it locked and loaded on, get it bolted down on the day before, and use it in the primary, and it doesn't give Donald Trump any time to respond, right? And I'm telling you, politicians are going to have to be able to do this going forward in the future. All right, let me build this idea up for you. Let me set it in place, and let's hope Andrew Yang uses it. All right, so here's the thing. Today we're going to be talking about the US-Greenland purchase. It's really, really a big deal. Before we talk about that, right, and honestly, I really think this is the hottest topic going in politics right now. And I think and one of the reasons why is the media doesn't get it. So the media is out of the way. The media has absolutely no understanding of what's happening with the US-Greenland purchase, right? And so since the media is out of the way, it gives politicians room to move. Because by far, we're really very quickly learning that the media is the most detrimental element in our politics today, without a doubt. I don't even think it's debatable anymore. All right, so let's get this out. So, excuse me. I want to give credit where credit's due. This idea this idea I'm about to put forward, this proposal plan, came from a genesis of some reading material that I've been taking in recently. I've been reading this fiction series, and it's a genius idea that comes from a genius person, right? All right, we need to talk about the X-Men. Yes, Marvel's X-Men, right. Charles Xavier, Wolverine, Iceman, Jean Grey, Nightcrawler, Beast, the whole crew, Jubilee, all of them, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about X-Men history here, okay? And I need to tell you this. We need to talk about X-Men history because we need to talk about X-Men now. Because what's happening in comic books right now with the X-Men is incredibly important to American politics, culture, and society. Okay, it's all incredibly important. All right. So basically, between the late X-Men came out in the late '60s, and the X-Men were fantastic, and they told amazing stories until the mid '80s. Okay. So there was a period between the late '60s and the mid '80s. All right, this was one era in X-Men. The stories that were told then were absolutely amazing. That's not a debatable. They were absolutely amazing. Okay, they were also analogies for how those stories, many of those stories, not all of them, but many of the stories told, the main themes told within the X-Men between the late '60s and the 1980s, the mid 1980s. They were about the LGBT community. They were about how the LGBT community, they were analogies for the LGBT community's acceptance by the non-LGBT community, okay? That part I just said, that's not really debatable. There's been books written on that subject, right? Many books, actually. There's been doctoral theses written on what I just said, right? Let's put that there, okay? Then came the next era of X-Men stories. I'm a huge X-Men fan. Let me put my bona fides down here, right? I have 4 children. 3 of my children are named after X-Men. Not kidding. They actually have names from the X-Men. All right. So with that set in place, I'm a huge, and also I've been buying X-Men books since 1982, right? So I know what I'm talking about here. So this next part is completely my opinion, though. Between the mid 1980s and 2019, there was a new era in X-Men books, and this was the unreadable era. Basically, in the mid 1980s, Marvel got in a lot of trouble. They got into serious financial trouble, and it was a problem. It was a really, really big problem. This was not a small thing. So they sold rights for the X-Men. Okay. And then for a long time, Sony owned the movie rights to the X-Men, okay? And actually, I think they at one point, no, not Sony. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Fox ended up with the movie rights to the X-Men, okay? So from the mid 1980s all the way up to 2019, Marvel was actually, this is completely my opinion though, Marvel was incented to not make the X-Men stories good, and they weren't good. Like, the material for X-Men between late 60s and early 1980s, those were groundbreaking stories that talked about philosophy, talked about politics, talked about culture, and talked about society. Between the 1985 and 2019, they were, Wolverine stabbed a guy with his claws, right? Like, there really wasn't anything there. And the reason why was Marvel actually literally did not, like, all my opinion, did not want to make the X-Men stories good, and the reason why is they didn't own it all, right? They were much more excited about properties where they own the comic book rights and the movie rights, right? And this really became a problem, I think, in the early 2000s, where there was really kind of a cap put on the X-Men titles, and there were no new X-Men comic book characters being created, and the writers literally couldn't build anything new into the world. And like, if they wrote the stories too well, I think they got rewritten, so they were less good, right? And the reason why was Marvel was really frustrated. They didn't want to make awesome characters and awesome stories for something they didn't own the movie rights to, right? So it got really kind of messed up, right? Well, what happened in 2019? In 2019, Disney bought Fox. Disney owns Marvel, right? So now in 2019, early in 2019, it was clear for Marvel that they could pick up X-Men stories again, and they could tell unleashed, unbound X-Men stories. They could make X-Men good again because they owned the comic book rights, and they own the movie rights, right? So right now, Marvel is actually incented to make good stories with the X-Men for the first time since the 1980s. And guess what? They are absolutely doing that. There's something very special. There's something transformative happening in the X-Men titles right now. There are 2 X-Men series that have just launched a few weeks ago, okay? House of X and Power of X. These are unprecedented in the history of comic books. They are absolutely amazing. And if you think I'm wrong, go try to buy them. You can't find them in any local comic shop anywhere around you. They are sold out. And when they hit the shelves on Wednesdays, new comics release on Wednesdays, they blow off the shelves. If you know, I walked in the other day to my local comic shop. I get up, I work a long day. I got off at like 7 p.m. and the comic shop closed at 8. I walked in at 7:45. Those books had released and were on the shelves around like 3 p.m. that day, and they were sold out already, right? These books are blowing off the shelves, right? All right, so what is happening in House of X and Power of X, right? Well, so basically, Marvel takes its writer dogs off their chain and says, you are unleashed. Go pursue out and grab me some prey, a good story that I can bring back that, for the readers to consume, right? So the X-Men writers have been unleashed. Well, more than that, Marvel chose this incredible writer. The gentleman's name is Jonathan Hickman. He's writing both House of X and Power of X, right? And basically, what he's doing, I've never seen anything like it in comic books. So basically, we talked about what the stories between late 60s and 1985 meant for X-Men. It was an analogy of how the LGBT community was received by the non-LGBT community, and they had many, many struggles, right? So now Jonathan Hickman is picking up the mutant human storyline of X-Men in 2019, right? So any normal comic book writer would go, okay, well, these stories about LGBTQ and acceptance, right? But you can't do that, and the reason why is what LGBTQ acceptance looked like in 1985 is not the same as it looks like in 2019. Queer Eye is a show. Pete Buttigieg is just one intersectionality candidate in a huge array of intersectionality candidates in the Democrat primary U.S. Democrat candidate pool, right? Pete Buttigieg him running is barely a story anymore, right? Acceptance of the LGBT community in 2019 looks nothing like what it looked like in 1985. So if you told the same type of stories in 2019 as you were trying to tell in 1985, it wouldn't look like right. It would be, you'd hit a wall because things have changed. Things have changed dramatically, right? In our culture, right? So that's a huge change, right? So Jonathan Hickman comes back to the X-Men, and he now has one of the most famous, most well-respected titles in all of comic books, right? And so he wants to do something special. He wants to do something unique. So he does. He is setting a new history for the X-Men right now, and a new present and a new future in these books in House of X and Power of X. And what these stories are about is they're about the mutant community fully having embraced their own power, right? No longer in fear of humanity, but actually progressing to the point where they have their own nation, a nation called Krakoa, which is on a small island an island in the Pacific, okay? And this is an independent nation where the X-Men live, right? Magneto actually explains it. He says, we have our own nation, it's an independent nation, we have our own language, and we have our own laws, right? And this allows us to do things as the mutant community that the humans cannot do. And we can make something of a limited paradise, right? So this is all Jonathan Hickman's idea, but it's the genesis of the idea I'm about to set in place for Yang, okay? All right. So this is incredible, right? It's really an incredible story, and it's a beautiful story too, right? The early 1980 to the early 1960s, late 1960s to early to the mid 1980s stories of X-Men were about them struggling for acceptance. Now in 2019, Jonathan Hickman is writing stories about the X-Men fully coming into their power and being so powerful and so accepted that they can now actually be almost like beneficial saviors for humanity. And in the story, Krakoa has these gardens that these mutants tend, and they grow these flowers, which are then synthesized into drugs, which cure all physical and mental maladies for humans, right? And so the mutants have reached a point where they're so advanced, so accepted, that they're no longer really in opposition to mutants are no longer in opposition to humans. What they are now is they're actually beneficial to humans at a level that humans are incapable of being beneficial to, right? But the thing that really caught me is, Jonathan Hickman is writing about an independent island nation with its own language and its own laws. And like I went, okay, wait. There's something huge there, right? Okay, Greenland, right? Like we're going to talk about it in a minute. All right, but there's one more thing that Jonathan Hickman is doing, and if you're a political wonk, you have to go get House of X and and Power of X. Okay, now it's going to cost you a lot of money because you cannot buy them on the shelves anywhere at retail price anymore. But the reality is, the reason why every political wonk has to read House of X and Power of X is Jonathan Hickman is not only is he transforming and relaunching the X-Men title into this beautiful new arc of storytelling, but at the same time he's doing this. This is a complicated story about politics, culture, and society, right? And he's doing this through data visualization. So the comic books have normal like, oh, here's a guy in spandex, right? And you'll see that in the comic book. But then interjected right into the middle of these comic books are these incredibly complex pages that have numbers, symbols, and text specifically placed onto the page in a way that they look like business reports, right? And you're like, what is this doing in the middle of my comic book, right? But the reality is they use data visualization in a new and transformative way to tell complex stories using data visualization. Well, guess what? Every politician in the world needs to communicate incredibly complex narratives using text, number, and symbols, right? So like, and we as political wonks, in order to understand, energy and transportation and language and a million other like high-end concepts, data visualization is emerging as a really important tool. Okay, so where do we land with all this? All right. So here's the idea that Andrew Yang sets into place on September 12th in the ABC Houston debate, right? This is my proposal for him. I think this will catapult him past every other person on the stage. It will establish him as something more than a UBI candidate. He really shouldn't have to be more than a UBI candidate, but the beast has to be fed, right? Like the media he's already given the media this brilliant idea of UBI, and it hasn't been enough. The media has ignored him, right? Also, the person who has ignored him is Donald Trump, right? Well, this plan is about to make it impossible for Donald Trump to ignore Yang and impossible for the media to ignore Yang, and it will catapult him past Trump and past every other candidate. So here's what we do, all right? So basically, based on the seed of an idea created by Jonathan Hickman, I'm proposing that Andrew Yang usurps Donald Trump's idea and completes what he has started, right? So basically, Andrew Yang would say, when I'm president, okay, I am going to listen to the Greenland Parliament. The Greenland Parliament last week said that if anybody's going to sell Greenland, it will be Greenlanders, not Denmark. As president, so Andrew Yang would be saying all this. As president, I will acknowledge Greenlanders as the owner of Greenland. That seems really obvious. We will no longer acknowledge the Queen of Denmark's ownership of that land because she's a monarch and they got it hundreds of years ago. And the Queen of Denmark is thousands of kilometers away from that land, Greenland, which is physiographically connected to America, right? America will then begin dealing directly with Greenlanders to purchase Greenland. America's offer to Greenland, to every Greenlander, will be $1 million a year for life, starting in year one of my presidency. Okay? $1 million a year for the 56,000 people who live in Greenland will be $56 billion a year. America currently spends $680 billion a year on defense. So this is less than 10% of this $56 billion that we'll be paying the Greenlanders for the rest of their lives, right? Or, you know, it would be $1 million a year for every single one of the 56,000 Greenlanders who live in Greenland, right? That'll be $56 billion a year, and that $56 billion is less than 10% of our military budget. That's it. That's all it is, right? And and we can absolutely afford that going forward. It's not a problem. It's kind of a rounding error for us. It's really no issue at all. And then so basically we will purchase. Andrew Yang will declare that he'll be purchasing Greenland in 2020, the first year of his presidency. If the Greenlanders say no to the deal, everything goes away. This is a real estate deal. It's a commercial deal. America would not be attempting to get Greenland in any other way. Just purely a commercial deal, right? And there's nothing to stop Andrew Yang from doing this, right? And also, it costs him nothing. Yes, and again, $56 billion. Come on, it's chump change. But it won't be chump change to them. Every single Greenlander, $1 million a year for the rest of their life. It's like literally like winning the lottery for them, right? So basically, America buys Greenland, and here's what we do with it under Andrew Yang. So Andrew Yang would be explaining this. So basically, we purchase Greenland. We own Greenland in 2020. We cut it up into 10 different states. Every single state becomes a U.S. state immediately under the U.S. Constitution. Every single person in Greenland becomes a United States citizen in 2020. Okay? We then have 10 years, right? And then at that 10-year mark, what we do is we use that 10 years to build an auxiliary charter. Okay? So Greenland will have 10 years with 10 U.S. states under U.S. constitutional law. In the 11th year, the entire nation will go under an auxiliary charter. And at that point, it will no longer be under the U.S. Constitution. There'll be still states, they'll still be American citizens, but they will be under new language and new law. Just like Krakoa, the mutant island of the X-Men, okay? New language, new law. This is the key, right? This is Jonathan Hickman's brilliance, right? New language, new law. Why does America need Greenland to have new language and new law? New language. We desperately need a new language, right? Written from the ground up so that everybody in America and Greenland, can begin speaking to each other with love and kindness and respect. The American language is now broken. We no longer have the ability to speak to each other with love, kindness, and respect. There's a huge battle right now going on over pronouns, and there are people who are saying English no longer is a language that allows me to be referred to with respect, kindness, and love, right? We can build a language from the ground up that allows people to be spoken to with love, kindness, and respect, right? In the identity profile that they choose, right? This is a really big deal. And also, if we are able to make this successful, we can make this a language that could be adopted by other nations as well. I think this is really, really a big deal. Magneto said this. He said, you need your own language to have your own culture and your own society. And that's absolutely true. And right now, we're about to try to break English in order to, there are pronouns that have functions right now that are going to stop having functions soon if we continue to move forward without a new language. Why do we need new laws? Because our current laws are so mired, right? Everybody on the red and the blue agrees with this, right? We have huge mired problems. They tried to build a high-speed rail in California over the last few years. $72 billion. It was like you could dump it in a hole and burn it. Nothing happened, right? You could not build a high-speed rail in California with $72 billion, right? And as we go forward, Congress and the Senate routinely, right, are not able to function and make laws the way they need to. In addition to that, we're right now talking about putting like 25, 35, 45 people on the Supreme Court. Every single branch of our government is straining because we don't have the laws we need to put into place to make new energy, new transportation, new health laws, right? So what we do is we buy Greenland. The first 10 years is 10 states, all under the U.S. Constitution, on year 11, they go under their own auxiliary charter. That auxiliary charter says that everybody who lives in Greenland speaks the new language, right? And everybody who lives in Greenland is under the new laws, right? Now, that could be the Greenlanders and the Americans who have lived there. Right now, if you live in New York, you can just go right over into Connecticut. Nobody can stop you from moving, right? It'll be the same thing with Greenland. It'll just be a bunch of new states. Anybody who wants can live there, right? And use the new language and the new laws. And the new laws will be there for 90 years. The auxiliary charter will be there for 90 years. We'll build a new language and new laws. And then at the end of that century, we will take the best of what has been built in Greenland and incorporate it into the American Constitution, and then rejoin Greenland into the American Constitution, right? It's a limited paradise that we can build, right? Why should Andrew Yang do this? Because it's brilliant. It usurps Trump's own idea, right? And it allows Trump to say, I'm going to finish what you started, right? It will drive Trump crazy without insulting him. It'll be, so basically Yang will be honoring and giving an homage to Donald Trump for this really, really good idea, which Trump's voters could find incredibly gracious, right? And at the same time, it will drive Trump crazy, right? And there's no way that the media can continue its Yang media blackout. There's no way that Trump can continue to ignore Yang. He'll have to address him at this point. And it's brilliant. And it helps a whole bunch of people who need new language, right? And it helps the whole nation who needs new laws. This is a great idea. This is a reasonable idea. The only loser in any of this is the Queen of Denmark. And guess what? She can go cry into her crowns. Right? I really think this is the best way to go. This catapults Yang past all of his opponents. This catapults Yang past Trump. And it uses the September 12th debate as a springboard. And that's exactly what it should be for Yang. That's my opinion. I'd love to hear your opinion. Please let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.